Okay, next I'd like to welcome Therese Glowacki, the Director of Boulder County Parks and Open Space, different department from City of Boulder, Open Space and Mountain Parks, to the stage to talk about the great work that they do.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I just want to say a couple of words about why Boulder County Parks and Open Space is a platinum sponsor for this event. So for those of you who don't know, Boulder County Parks and Open Space owns in some fashion about 110,000 acres here in Boulder County. And our goal is to preserve open spaces and to preserve agriculture. And of that 110,000 acres, about 25,000 is in agriculture. So it is currently growing crops and livestock and all the things that agriculture does for us. So who pays for this land? So you sitting in here, if you live in Boulder County and you buy food in the grocery store, well, you buy clothing or anything, your sales taxes go to support open space, as well as property taxes. We just renewed our sales tax this past November, and 80% of voters in Boulder County support what we are doing as far as preserving land and offering recreation and preserving agriculture. Now, we, Parks and Open Space staff, could not do it without our agricultural tenants. Our farmers are our partners. We have about 70 tenants who lease county open space that they run CSAs, they provide food for farmers markets, they grow wheat and corn and livestock, and it really is the partnership between the public lands and these farmers that help keep our county looking the way that it does. And many of them are here today, and I want to thank our tenant farmers that have joined us for this soil revolution. So as Parks and Open Space managing agricultural land, we are prioritizing soil health. And that's why we sponsor this conference. We've been sponsoring it since the beginning. I have come every year, and this is the best conference that I go to, without a doubt. So we're putting our money where our mouth is as well, as far as supporting soil health practices. This past year, we are working with our farmers, our producers. We put out a call to them for what it would take, because we know implementing soil health practices are expensive and might not fit into the economics that they are dealing with on a daily basis to grow crops. And we put out a call for helping to fund those soil health practices, and we got twice as many requests by our farmers than funding we had. So we're increasing our money this year. So we are definitely moving forward with soil health. So I just want to thank the conference organizers, the people here that put their time and energy finding great speakers, all the logistics. We know it is very complicated, and what it really does is brings together people of like minds, all of you sitting here in the office, in the audience, that are not in your offices. All you people sitting here that are here looking for inspiring ideas, thinking of ways that you can improve, whether it's your small farm, whether it's your backyard, whether it's your 400 acres that you're farming. That's what this conference is all about, and I think without a doubt, once again, it is accomplishing those goals. So thank you very much for the organizers, and thank you everyone for attending.
All right, next to the stage is Brett Kincairn with Cool Boulder.
Hello, Soil Rev 2023. Amazing, huh? Thank you. I also have been here every year, and I have to tell you that, as Therese said, this is actually, I view, honestly, one of the most important community gatherings we have every year in terms of advancing our shared understanding and learning around how we can work in right relationship with our living world. So I also just want to make sure that, I suppose that you all know this, but this doesn't happen by accident. The quality and the value, the remarkable speakers that are brought every year does not happen by accident. It happens because there are a few people who every year put an enormous amount of their own personal time and effort into this. So let's again thank Vanessa McCracken, Lindsay Gonzalez, Lauren Kolb, Trent Kesher, and Colin Williams this year. So thank you so much. Actually, it was Lauren Kolb who took the picture that you're now looking at. This was, some of you might remember this event this past spring. Lauren just happened to be getting on an airplane. Did you actually sort of organize for this? So she happened to be flying over as we had one of our now increasingly common dust storms. And it's emblematic of the kinds of challenges that we're going to face. So I work for the City of Boulder's Climate Initiatives Department. I have the privilege of being a part of our nature-based solutions team. And our charge from our community and our elected leaders is to figure out how we start working more actively with our living world to start to prepare for and to be buffering ourselves through the kinds of changes that we're going to see. Next slide. So this is actually a compilation of the heat records for our area that our Open Space and Mountain Parks Division recently compiled. This is super fascinating if you look at it. So 1900 to the current, you see the trend line for temperature. I hadn't actually ever seen this. I hadn't seen that in the Dust Bowl we had a spike in temperatures. Of course, if you talk to the old farmers that might not be around anymore, but those who were working the land at that time, they remember that. I didn't know that we had a very intense heat extreme period during the 50s. And then you can see the one that we're going through. And you can see not only how it's taller and how it's wider. In other words, we're seeing more intense and more enduring drought cycles and heat cycles in our community. Next slide. Because of that, we have been trying to develop methods by which we can actually project what level of climate impacts we're going to be facing. Rather than sitting in a room and saying, is it going to be bad, really bad, or awfully bad, we want to say, well, how extensive are these particular risks that we might be facing? So this is a tool that we just have completed. It was developed by a former CU professor and his team at Resilient Analytics. It helps us to see across a variety of different climate risks, including extreme heat, duration of heat, high fire days, extreme weather events. Next slide. And I'm just going to pull out 3 of the statistics that these compilations, these are basically taking the global climate models and downscaling them to our locale to tell us what we might be expecting in the next, at 2030 and 2050 under different scenarios of climate change. And in just in the more moderate of climate change projections, in terms of extreme precipitation events, our historic number was in the neighborhood of 3 a year. We're looking at, by 2030, 10, so a 3x increase. In terms of days over 95, our historic was around 5. By 2030, we're looking at something like 20. That's a 4x increase. In terms of high fire days, our average was in the neighborhood of 12. Our current, in just the last 5 years, is now 116. By 2030, we might be seeing something like 200 high fire days per year. Something like 15x increase. Next slide. So clearly we have to think about how we're going to manage our lands to prepare for these kinds of changes. This is a report that was just completed by our Open Space and Mountain Parks Division. We were looking at the carbon dynamics of our landscapes and whether or not our landscapes might be able to counterbalance the emissions that we're giving off in our community. The quick answer is no. And the more important answer is that the question is not how much more carbon our landscapes can absorb. It is how we avoid releasing the carbon that we have in our landscapes. Next slide. So as a consequence, we're really starting to shift our efforts to understand our landscapes to the issue of resilience, and especially how our landscapes retain and cycle water. Because as we've come to start to see, carbon is a lagging indicator of the things that we want to be accomplishing. Water is the leading indicator. So we are now launching an initiative to create a landscape scale analysis system that will enable us to have, first of all, a kind of early warning system for landscapes that are starting to trend towards desertification. And hopefully, next slide, a system by which we can actually start looking at the land management that's happening watching it from space and in other ways real time to see where you as land managers are actually accomplishing improvements in the way our landscapes are retaining and cycling water, and figuring out ways that we can provide incentives to you to do that. We believe that managing water is the place we should be putting our incentives, not carbon. So that's just a kind of preview. We're going to be releasing a big request for proposals in January to initiate this project. We'll be working in a landscape probably in this general area. These are the conservation district boundaries. That's pretty good mapping for the area that we want to look at, so we may be using that as our analysis area. We'll certainly be giving you some of the feedback and results from that next year. So thank you very much for being here today. Really appreciate you all being here. Thanks.
Thank you, Brett. Next, we will transition to our local updates. So here we have 3 different 15-minute talks by producers and professionals in the area. And we're going to be starting with my colleague, Eric Fairlee, from my department, Open Space and Mountain Parks here in Boulder.
Hi, Eric Fairlee. I'm with Open Space and Mountain Parks. I work on the team right there at that table, who helps to rehabilitate all of our irrigated agricultural fields that are kind of in disarray. We're doing this in and around prairie dogs. We're doing it following the removal of prairie dogs, but we're also doing this type of work in the presence of prairie dogs. It's not just those lands. We have some embedded natural areas that we work on as well, and I'll briefly introduce what we are doing on those fields. So here's the team. So thanks John, Jackie, Carissa, Daniel, hope I don't forget anybody, Rob and Dave, for all the work you put in this year. Definitely working outside of the regular bounds of city government officials to get this stuff done. You know, I have to talk about infrastructure. You can't have an irrigated agricultural field and have viable production on a field without making sure that the infrastructure is in place. We're spending a lot of time on these fields fixing fences and gates and head gates, getting water back to the sites, making water can spread out through the sites. What am I missing? Culverts, crossings, name it. We're doing all that work as well, and we have to have that conversation. And so this is what we're dealing with. This is the Bennett property in 2018. And this is a site that we're rehabilitating in the presence of prairie dogs. And so that's what it looked like. It was basically subsoil, I believe, and nothing growing on it. That was February, so the worst time of the year for looking at a property, but that's the kind of stuff we're dealing with. And so our very own Lauren Kolb started a project to look at what are some techniques that we can use in these situations to get them up and running. And so what we came down with was key lining, seeding, and compost, seeding both perennial and cover crop. And we were getting really good results from that. And so we expanded that not only in time on this particular area, but onto a dozen other properties on open space. Because we're working with prairie dogs, and prairie dogs like to eat things, and prairie dogs also don't like tall vegetation. There's a reason why they don't live in tall grass prairie. It's because it's tall grass isn't dense and they don't like it. So we replicated that. We mimicked what nature is showing us. And so we added summer cover crops to the mix. So sorghum, corn, pumpkins, sunflowers, turnips, stuff like that. And so we found that those things grow so rapidly in the summer that the prairie dogs view that area as non-habitat, allowing for that system to start recovering it by itself. And so that is what that field looks like now. Again, that's November, so if you took the photo in February, it wouldn't look that good, but we've come a long way. Again, this is in the presence of prairie dogs. They eat everything you put down. And so if you can make this work in the presence of prairie dogs, imagine what you can do without them, or with the right tools. I'm not saying I promote removal or keeping. I'm just saying if you can make something happen in the worst conditions, then anything's possible. And so another important feature about these fields, again, most of them are irrigated that we're working with, making sure we're doing the best with the water that we have. A lot of these fields are pretty compacted, and so when we flood irrigate them, it just sheets off, and it does eventually infiltrate, but it takes a lot of water to get into the ground of a highly compacted field. And so one of the things we're doing is using key lines, which you've heard a little bit about today. Not only are they creating those openings in the soil, allow water to infiltrate, but we're seeing that it really promotes seedling germination within the key lines as well. Our key line system is set up with a tank that we can drip liquid compost, vermicast, tea, whatever you want, into the key lines as we go. And it has seed pots as well, so we can seed as we're going, so kind of a one-step solution. We do have to, to get a really good seeding, you have to do some more work. Typically have to go over again with the seeder, but you might as well just put the seed in there if you have it. Back to water, going along the lines of water, where appropriate, we put on contour swales. And we don't use this in all situations, but there are places where we found that we can really make the best use of that irrigation water. And so the thing on that side, the far side, that's the Bennett property. There's a series of 3 on-contour swales, so just running on the contour. And there's a ditch running down by where that truck is in the background. And so we feed the water into the swale. It fills up, and because it's on contour, water spills over that berm and irrigates the entire field below it, and then it dumps into the next swale, and so on and so forth. To make that a little bit more efficient, we do run water into each individual swale, but it's a very easy hand-on way to get water onto a field. Basically, you stick a dam in, let it run itself. It's really nice operation. Not only that, but the water concentration, slowing it down, infiltrating in, that's going to allow us to have an opportunity to put in areas of really robust vegetation where that swale is. That could be pollinator strips, habitat strips. In an area where you have prairie dogs, it could be a visual buffer to help manage prairie dog occupation within that field. It can be grazed as well, so it has a lot of benefits, not just the water side of things. The other swale is kind of cool. It's designed, it's rough looking because that was this year. It's designed to capture water from different irrigation sets on that field, and so instead of losing that water immediately for tailwater, we're able to redirect it to the swale. And so downhill of the swale is hard to irrigate, and so prairie dogs might remain there into perpetuity. Uphill is easy to irrigate, and ultimately it would be nice to not have prairie dogs in that area, and we think we can do that through vegetation management. And so this is going to be a highly concentrated area of water and moisture and nutrients, and so we should be able to create a really robust, kind of like in the Bennett conversation, really robust plant community in here that can not only provide all the benefits that tall, robust green vegetation provides, but be that visual barrier to keep prairie dogs on one side and not on the other. More traditional approaches, compost. We've talked about compost a lot. One thing that's really cool is that we are working with Boulder Mushroom in order to take people's forestry product waste, wood chips, and instead of just throwing that carbon away, which we really need, clearly our soil needs some carbon, we're inoculating that with mushroom species that break down wood chips, and then we're going to spread that compost, the wood chip material around, so you can take someone's waste, take their carbon, and put it back into the soil where it belongs. Cover crops, you've heard a little bit about cover crops. We use everything, as many things as we can. The one grouping of cover crops, especially in the presence of prairie dogs, we find extremely beneficial are their summer cover crops, which I mentioned. Is there a pointer on this? Maybe that. So this whole field looked like this. Downhill is irrigated, uphill is not, but it doesn't matter. The whole thing looked like that. It was a disaster. Part of Lauren's windstorm was that. And so we used that warm season cover crop this year. You can see the growth. The prairie dogs don't like tall vegetation. They contracted. And then you get all other additional benefits of a cover crop. You could graze that. You could use it for silage. I don't care what you do with it. You could turn that into a pumpkin patch if you want and harvest the pumpkins. You can throw pigs out there, turnips, radishes, name it, you can do it. So there are a lot of opportunities to not only help rehabilitate these highly degraded properties with or without prairie dogs, but if in the situation of us where we have prairie dogs, we can do that in the presence of prairie dogs, and I think we can do it pretty successfully. Animal integration, pretty essential to what we do. So we have more wood chip waste, and we inoculated them with mushrooms or tenanted, and then instead of us spreading that around with equipment and spending gas and time, just let the pigs do it. That's also a potential stream of income for that farmer as well. So not only are we spreading out carbon that's inoculated with mycelium, but then we get the manure and the urine benefits of the pigs, and plus they can sell the pigs. Chickens, same thing. We have all these areas that are not very productive, definitely not productive enough for cattle. Let's try chicken tractors out there and see if we can rejuvenate that soil and have a stream of income at the same time. bale grazing, we talked about that today. Really wanted to point out, and just look at that. This whole area was seeded at the same time, and just where the hay was, the growth was unbelievable. So if you're not a fan of bale grazing, you should be after seeing that. It's unbelievable. And so basically what we're doing, or at least what some of our tenants are doing, they're adding about 0.5% of extra hay per pound of animal in order to have that extra hay on the ground to provide all the benefits of covering that soil, providing nutrients, and so on and so forth. We also use animal integration for natural area restoration opportunities. This channel is straightened and down cut, and you can see how eroded it is here, and the photo got cut off. But basically, the whole thing is highly unstable and eroded, full of common teasel, Canada thistle, perennial pepperweed. It's just a continuously degraded ecosystem. Had no grazing for a long time. Prior to that, it probably had too much grazing. Cattle need a drink. And so what we're doing is working with the tenant to strategically place water access sites along that creek. And what you're seeing is, this is that grazing site, our first one, and it completely reshaped and recontoured that bank and stabilized it. Not only that, but the noxious weeds that were dominating along this portion are gone, and it's all native vegetation. It also created an intact floodplain, small, but still a floodplain. And as we continue this, you're going to start to see meanders recreate, and that's simply from cattle access. And this is what we wanted to do. Instead of having high water just slice through this channel like a knife, it's able to hit this grazed area, this newly created floodplain, spread out, slow down, infiltrate, and create a riparian stream ecosystem that it should be. We use them for noxious weed nightmares. This is common teasel. That is a nightmare, oh my God. Gives me the creepy crawlies thinking about this. This is as bad as it gets. There are some natives underneath it, but this is horrible. So this photo was taken in August of 2021. We put pigs in there in the winter of 2021, 2022. The pigs ate all the teasel. And that's what it looked like 2022. So it requires maintenance, livestock maintenance, but again, just thinking about how nature works, thinking about what an animal can do, think about what the native plants want, what the non-native plants don't want, and just kind of merge them together, and that's the result you get. So, oh yeah, and then of course you saw a couple pictures on there of pretty denuded land. They don't have plants. They need plants. They need a diversity of plants. You can buy some plants, and we do from the vendors here. But in order to get that high level of diversity that we need in our systems, we have a pretty robust native seed collection program to add the diversity that we need, a little extra punch, to make these systems more productive, to make them more resilient, to provide all the ecosystem services that diversity provides to the land. And then we take some of those seeds, most of them get sowed onto the land. Some are growing up for like little smaller scale projects, like maybe a swale or a hedgerow or a pollinator strip or whatever it is. So we try to think holistically, try to mimic nature and do whatever we can to be ready for whatever challenges nature brings. So that is it.
Thank you, Eric. Next up, we have Vanessa McCracken from the Boulder Valley and Longmont Conservation Districts here to talk about what they've been up to.
Okay, good afternoon. I'm happy to be back here talking about mostly the STAR program. I think this is the third year I've stood up here and talked about the STAR program, so happy to share about that again. So before we get to the STAR program, just a little bit of background about the conservation districts. We have been around since the Dust Bowl in 1945 and 1946. Our Board of Supervisors are elected and completely volunteer, and they spend a lot of time at monthly board meetings and in between board meetings. So just wanted to recognize our boards: Dan Lisco, Keith Bateman, Scott Miller, Cindy Domenico, Chris Reichard, John Sikich, Rich Koopman, Mike Rademacher, Jules Van Tyne, and Wyatt Barnes. And we also have some associate supervisors for Longmont as well, Rob Alexander, JD Birch, and Dean Lukanen as well. So Longmont and Boulder Valley Conservation Districts is quite a mouthful, so we have just started calling ourselves BVLCD. So if you hear BVLCD, that's the conservation districts that we're referring to. And for me, our mission and function really boils down to working with landowners and land managers to implement conservation practices on the ground. So there's the function and the mission, but really it's finding the resources, the funding, the willing cooperators to get conservation practices implemented on the ground. Our staff just wanted to recognize, they greeted you as you registered this morning. I'm the district manager. Hanya Olashuk is our district conservation technician working with ag producers on anything ag and water related. Alex Hill is our new administrative specialist, and then we have 3 foresters on our staff as well: Jessica Jackman, Ben Markle, and Rob Walker. I don't know why I love this picture so much, I just do. It's the Front Range, it's a cool perspective. The red line is sort of an approximate district boundary, so you kind of get an idea of, the diversity of the landscape that we work in here. Okay, back to the STAR program. So the STAR program and the Colorado Soil Health Program has been in the works for many years at this point. In 2018 and 2019, the Colorado Association of Conservation Districts backed this effort. It was really a grassroots effort, spearheaded really by the Colorado State Conservation Board at CDA. Commissioner of Ag, Kate Greenberg, who's been here before, really has that as one of her wildly important goals, to make healthy soil a leading strategy for CDA. And all kinds of process, you can read more about it on the CDA website. But it was really meant to be inclusive and take into account the wide diversity of the entire state of Colorado. So what is it today? What does it become? A free and voluntary tool to inspire producers and structure conversations around soil health. For producers who are in the program, it is a 3-year commitment, practice-based rating system that assigns points for implementing soil health practices. Producers receive ratings from 1 to 5 to help them better understand how they are upholding those principles of soil health. So how does it work? There's actually, it's more like a web than a 1 through 4 step situation, but really, our staff will come out and perform initial consultations, a lot of times with other partners and resources as well. Producers complete those consultation forms, you do your eligibility, points are assigned, we do field forms, so you get your STAR rating, you receive a field sign, and then the meat of the program really is to implement those practices over the next 3 years. There are incentive payments to producers at $75 an acre, and those monies have to be matched by the producers as well. So we have several STAR signs across the conservation districts. So there's some in Weld County and many in Boulder County. This shows kind of, 1 star is kind of we're at the beginning, and I think that picture is a good illustration of that. There's some work to be done on that field. So we're hoping over the course of the 3 years that the producers are in the program that their STAR rating will increase. There's a lot of work behind the scenes in the STAR program at the CDA level. So there has been a ton of fundraising to make this program. It's entirely grant and partner supported at this point. So in the first round of the STAR program, which we began a couple years ago, the producers in the Boulder Valley Conservation District that signed up were the Wade Farms, Isabel Farm, Bateman Farms, Growing Gardens, and Sombrero Farms. And at least 4 out of the 5 are in the room, which is awesome. In the second round, we got to add 5 more producers: Esoteric Culinary Garden, Anderson Biella Angus, Boulder Valley Ranch, Cure Organic Farm, and we have space. So we have room for one more producer as well. In the Longmont Conservation, oh, I should say, some of those people are in the room too. In the Longmont Conservation District, first round, we had room for 7 producers. So Kilt Farm, Red Wagon Farm, Seekage Land and Livestock, Boulder Better Wagyu, JD Birch, Van Tyne Farms, and Rocky Mountain Pumpkin Ranch, which those people are in the room too, so thank you for being here. Second round, we were going to add 3 more producers. We've added Darren Palumbo and Miraflora Farm, and again, we have one more spot available in the Longmont Conservation District. So for the producers in the second round, this is sort of a very brief timeline of what being in the program looks like. So summer, we're still sort of in summer of 2023 right now. We're still signing up people, we're doing consultations, and some of that is yet to be done. But the way it looks is then in 2023, the crop year, this crop year, you'll be implementing those practices, receiving an incentive payment. We'll check in with everybody each year, do your practices again, get an incentive payment, do it one more time in year 3, and then we'll follow up with a final consultation and kind of close out with the program. It does, I mean, it's new. The STAR program is new, so things change as the program is being implemented, but this is what we hope that it looks like. So what are we doing? Eric had so many amazing pictures of all the awesome things the City of Boulder is doing, which was so cool to see. So what are we doing in the STAR program? Boulder Valley Conservation District is basically Highway 52 south to the county line. So we have producers that are implementing rotational grazing, installing fencing, doing compost application, and returning annual cropland to more perennial systems. Similar things going on north of Highway 52 in the Longmont Conservation District. Some cover cropping and returning annual cropland to perennial systems. So how has this translated in economic impact for producers? I pulled these numbers together. So everything that is run, every incentive payment that is run through the Conservation District, this is what we've done in the last 2 years. So between Boulder Valley and Longmont, between incentive payments and equipment grants, we've distributed over $150,000 to local producers through the STAR program. And there's more to the STAR program. There's also soil moisture monitoring is part of the program as well. So our friends Steve and Ian from CSU make the trek down and help, well, they do it, I hope, install the soil moisture sensors for all of the producers in the Longmont Conservation District in round 1 had soil moisture sensors installed, and then every producer who's enrolled in round 2 will receive soil moisture sensors as well. There's also soil health tests in year 1 and year 3, so there's a lot going on with the STAR program. So just a couple pictures of what we've done with the money. So this is, a new perimeter fence was installed so we could maximize the rotational grazing ability on this project. This is another STAR field in Boulder Valley. This is actually a county open space property. If you're familiar with the south side of Lafayette, this is the Warrenburg Lafayette property, smashed between Cold Creek and apartments. And Keith Bateman is the producer here, and he really took a degraded hayfield and planted an amazing cover crop that he planted just in time in April to get all of the great spring moisture we had. And it was a phenomenal field that he had this year for the STAR program. And on top of just the planting, I think what's even more important is the picture with the people in it. We were able to host the Upper South Platte Watershed Association, which is a group of 14 conservation districts. We hosted one of the summer meetings, and so we had people from sort of across north central, the Upper South Platte area, come and see the good things that our Boulder County producers are doing. It's like a trick question. Okay, the guy in the hat that's kneeling down, his face is in the shade. Does anybody have a guess who that is? He's a former Soil Revolution speaker from way back. No, good guess. Anyway, okay, that is Marlon Winger. He is a soil scientist with the NRCS. NRCS hosted a soil health sort of training for a lot of their new staff. And where did we go to look at some good soil? We went to John Sekich's Starfield in Weld County. So it's, again, great to be using these fields and these examples for not just the intrinsic value, but to educate others as well. So we appreciate all of the star farmers for all of the intrusion that I give them all the time with all these requests for more people to come see. Here's another example of that. Rocky Mountain Soil Health Roundtable was hosted in September. This was a gathering of folks who were interested in soil health from across the western United States. Several people from Montana, Washington, Nevada, multiple other states came together at CSU Spur for a day. Many partners organized that. I will miss them if I try to name them all. But day 2 was a field day to where? To awesome Boulder Valley and Longmont conservation districts to see some of the star producers there too. So you recognize the Kilted farmer Michael Moss, who's here hosting the Rocky Mountain Soil Health Roundtable at his farm. And then we also went back to Sekich's farm that day too. And you can see we had a really great gathering of people there sharing their knowledge. In a way, it's like this, but in the field, right? Like just people gathered to, you know, share all kinds of knowledge back and forth. It was a great day. Okay, not star, but still a couple other awesome things going on in the county. Eric already talked about the picture on the left there. That's the wood chips from the forestry projects that are now, on this day, there was a volunteer event. This is the Boulder Watershed Collective organized this volunteer event where people came out and actually did the inoculation, the fungal inoculation of the wood chips that will then be used on the degraded ag land. So that was fantastic. On the right, we worked with the Colorado Ag Water Alliance to do a drought resiliency project. This was, again, this is another county open space property. That was a challenge this year. If you remember, June was not particularly a drought. So our data was a little useless this year because we were trying to do different residue things, and because it didn't stop raining for a month, it threw it off. But we're gonna keep trying. And let's see, so also not star plus, but still awesome. You know, this is another picture of this fall where local producers, you know, were able to let the field regrow and use that as forage for horses before the snow and after the snow this fall. You can see, you know, the background is not green, but the foreground is green. So I just want to really acknowledge there's a lot of good going on in the county, in the surrounding areas of producers really thinking about implementing these soil health practices in ways that work for them. Almost to the end here, John Miller, who's the CDA Soil Health Program Manager, he spoke to you briefly as an exhibitor. He was kind enough to share, I totally stole this, John. This is John's vision, but I loved it so much I wanted to share it with you all. On the left is Hugh Hammond Bennett. Many know him as the father of the soil conservation movement, you know, standing in an extremely eroded field. And on the right is really, you know, the opposite of what's happening there. And so the contrast of those two images is kind of what I wanted to leave you all with, knowing that getting from one place to the other would be beautiful and wonderful and fantastic, and the goal of everyone in the room, just acknowledging that, you know, there's my Wendell Berry quote there, the people will always be in part of the equation, and they're complicated systems, and there's reasons why things are done, and just really acknowledging that the people is part of the system as well. All right, so if you have any questions about the Conservation District or the STAR program locally, please reach out to me. That's my contact information. If you have questions about the STAR program or the statewide soil health program, John is in the back, or you can, you know, log on to the website and learn a whole lot more. So thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Vanessa. And our last local update is courtesy of Nick DiDomenico. He's here to represent Zero Foodprint as well as his own operation. So please help me welcome Nick to the stage.
Hey everybody, I'm gonna play the movie. They were supposed to play a Zero Foodprint film, I think, right?
There's no biological free lunch.
There has been a focus in agriculture to make things faster, better, fatter, heavier, easier.
We now know that agriculture is one of the leading contributors to climate change. But what we also know is that farming with a focus on soil health is absolutely one of the best things that people can do to take action against the climate crisis.
I'm a climate crusader, I'm a father, I'm a chef. In the past few years, scientists and actually biogeochemists have started to determine that regenerative agriculture could be one of the biggest, maybe even the single biggest solution to the climate crisis. Regenerative agriculture, I would define as basically farming with nature. You could just start growing tastier food and better ingredients while fighting climate change. A win-win-win. So in addition to taking carbon out of the atmosphere and restoring it in healthy soil, it's also creating better water conservation, resilience to extreme weather and fire. Local businesses sign up for Zero Foodprint. They send 1% of sales, and in turn, those grants are given out to farms and ranches in the region that implement healthy soil practices.
I use funding to turn 1 acre of my property on the northern hillside into a carbon sequestering native bee food basket.
We used our grant to purchase compost for our farm to give back to our soil.
Zero Foodprint is a really unique way of saying, let's really circleize our economy. By having healthy land, we have healthy animals and healthy food to feed our community.
We've seen what bad food practices through industrial farming, through large-scale milling and other things. We've seen the effects around that. There's a responsibility of the restaurant and all restaurants and food systems to be thinking about this.
Because food is community, and if we are gathering with friends and creating quality in life, we need to make sure that that quality goes beyond our tables. It goes back to the farmers, it goes back to the land, and it goes back to a future for all of us.
Zero Foodprint is a table-to-farm movement. It's kind of bridging urban and rural divides and starting to bring some of those resources from the urban food economies back into agricultural working lands. That loop didn't exist before. It was always kind of a one-way flow of resources and nutrients being extracted from the farms and the soil, and now this is restoring it. Zero Foodprint is helping businesses and consumers and citizens directly change how food is grown.
Shout out to Cody and Mel and Andy Brighter and Chris. I saw Chris here today too. Some fellow young farmers. So my name is Nick DiDomenico. I'm the co-founder of Drylands Agroecology Research. We're a 501c3 based here in Boulder County, and DARA is a collective of farmers, advocates, scientists, educators, all on a mission to regenerate landscapes, both ecological and social landscapes. And I'm here on behalf of Zero Foodprint and Restore Colorado. We're going to talk a little bit about a project that we used some Restore Colorado funding to complete the project. And just again, Zero Foodprint's doing awesome stuff. So maybe you go into Boulder and you have a fancy dinner down on Pearl Street, see a little 1% little thing at the bottom of your ticket. So there's different restaurants that have signed on to the program that let the consumer basically use that 1% of the bill to fund this Restore Fund that then goes to grants to support farmers and ranchers in doing conservation practices. So really cool stuff. all spearheaded by Anthony Mint, so shout out to him too, wherever he is. Different practices like tree and shrub establishments, shelter belts and windbreaks, rangeland plantings, and reduced tillage are all funded by the grant. I know that they used to fund compost application as well. For some reason, there's not data in the comment system for compost application in Colorado, so somebody at CSU ought to figure that one out so that we can do some cropland and rangeland compost applications again. The first Restore Colorado grant that DAR got, thanks to Mad Ag and Clark, was to do some compost applications on 2 of our partner farms. DAR manages about 164 acres, 14 acres at Elk Run, and about 100 acres at Yellow Barn Farm, and then 50 acres across the street from Elk Run on a lease with Cemex. So we're first-generation farmers, mostly running a small herd of cattle, sheep, chickens, pigs, and ducks, and then doing different new conservation practices like establishing water management systems with contour agroforestry, and then practicing rotational grazing inside of that, and then crop and livestock integrations. So we'll talk a little bit about a project that we've been doing. So this is at Metacarbon Farm. Metacarbon is primarily a diverse vegetable production. So they have veggies in about 1 acre there. And then in 2021, we helped them put in 10 acres of silvopasture in this 10 acre field there. So that's about 1,500 trees in there. And then this project was to basically support Metacarbon in developing a rotational grazing system for horses that they have. So they take on Mustangs and break Mustangs and have a bunch of horses there, and they wanted to reduce feed costs. And so we've been practicing these water management systems using earthworks, kind of a little bit like what Eric Fairlee was talking about. Kind of cool to hear that here. I thought I might be the only one talking about swales, or what the USDA calls terraces. So we'll talk about that in a sec. But this project basically, this 40-acre field on this side, this acreage below, this can all be flood irrigated from the lake ditch of left-hand water. So we were tasked with designing a water management system to establish an agroforestry system that would create alleyways that could be grazed by the horses to reduce feed costs. And then the idea with these contour systems is to create these habitat buffers, right? So places where trees and shrubs can establish to have these ecosystem effects, right? We're trying to design ecosystems that can function agriculturally. So the idea is these trees and shrubs, when they're established, they will create habitat buffers for insects and birds and create wind buffers. So then at the same time creating these moist microclimates, right, where the evapotranspiration of the trees and shrubs can create denser pasture growth, and even the shade can improve forage growth in the pastures. And then we're also creating 3-dimensional foraging systems, right? So in this case, the horses, or what can be grazed behind the horses with maybe the sheep that our friend Eric Knutson has on the property right above there. Basically, the different grazing animals can also graze the trees and shrubs as well. So in this system, we're planting all trees and shrubs that horses can forage. So mostly pears, mulberries, hackberries, and then honey locust and nitrogen-fixing shrubs between every fruiting plant to provide that symbiotic effect with the fruiting plants. And then this is just a picture of these swales or contour terraces after they're built. So in this section down here is where the trees and shrubs will be planted. And then this is an irrigation lateral that will irrigate the alley after the contour swale or terrace. And for those that are curious where these kind of practices come from, just wanted to acknowledge that there's a whole NRCS USDA engineering field manual that talks all about that. So one of 19 practices in this field manual is terracing. And so just straight from this, these texts, the USDA writes, the use of terraces for erosion control in the United States became an accepted practice after the Dust Bowl years. The newly formed Soil Erosion Services provided demonstration of these practices on severely eroded cotton lands. Terraces are used on flat to moderate uniform slopes to control sheet and rill erosion. This is accomplished by shortening the length of the runoff flow path. So we've been using these contour terraces to do even more than that, but there's some great examples of this in this NRCS field manual from different cropping fields, and I think this is just really amazing actually. Because imagine if even annual cropping fields had the ecosystemic functions of perennial ranges and other ecosystems. So I think the implications of these kind of practices are really important for the arid West where we are. And then furthermore, in a project like this, the idea with these sets of terracing is that we're creating a water management system that will collect, store, and distribute every single drop of moisture that both falls on the property and from all the flood irrigation. So in this case, Hardy mostly uses all of his irrigation rights on his annual crop field, so he can only really irrigate these parcels during free irrigation. So basically the trees and shrubs that we plant in these contour terraces, they're going to be effectively dry lands after 1 or 2, maybe 2 waters in the spring. So for us, the way that we're building and designing these systems, both on incredibly degraded land and also in irrigated circumstances like this, is that we're filling these contour terraces with compost and wood chips, and that acts as a battery, right? So that's storing all the moisture so that throughout the year that moisture is being given to the trees and shrubs. So this project was funded primarily by the Boulder County 22 Climate Innovations Grant, and then the last little chunk of funding that we needed came from Restore Colorado. So in this case, we were actually the technical service provider for Metacarbon Farm, but all kinds of different cool opportunities we can use this grant funding for as farmers and ranchers. Just want to encourage that. And then this is a shot from above after being built. So this was built just this last fall. Looking for, we're here in the north looking to or here in the south looking to the north. And then another shot from kind of like the northwest looking toward the southeast. And this is a little bit more about how the system was built. So this is a D2 bulldozer. And you might think, wow, this is going to take forever to build. This is going to take a lot of money to build. We actually built these 5,000 linear feet of terracing in 1 day with this bulldozer. And then 1 other day to cut in the laterals for the irrigation. So actually pretty quick establishment in that way. We're going to be planting about 2,500 trees and shrubs in the spring with all volunteers. So if anybody wants to come out and plant trees with us, we would love to have you. And then in this kind of a system, we put 160 yards of compost and 220 yards of wood chips inside of these basins to be watering the trees and fertilizing them through the years to come. And then through the COMET modeling, we have found that this system is projected to sequester 77 tons of carbon at maturity annually. So that's pretty darn good for a system like this. And I think just to back up to the idea for me in a system like this is that water really is the limiting factor for how much carbon we can sequester in a landscape in the arid West, right? So by creating a system where flood irrigation water and all natural precipitation is sunk directly into the land, we aim to demonstrate that this kind of a system will sequester much more carbon over time and create much more ecosystemic benefits than if this was just rangeland or grazing land. And then the idea again is that the horses will rotationally graze through these alleys. So in that same way, this water management system has already set up a really clear rotational grazing system just from the establishment of it. And then just for perspective, I would have loved to have some pictures of these trees and shrubs growing in the growing season, but this is me just a couple days ago out in the silvopasture planted in 2021. So this is an apple tree. I was trying to get my pup to pose for us and do a little sit right next to the tree, but he wouldn't quite abide. But you can see that these are 2 tree cages right there, about 18 inches each. So this tree is about 5.5 feet tall. That tree has gotten watered 1 time in the last 3 seasons and is ready for grafting. So in this system, in the original silvopasture, there's apples, pears, mulberries that can all be used for food, human production, orcharding, and also for cleaning with livestock. And then in the lifetime of DAR, we've been able to establish about 13,000 trees, or plant about 13,000 trees with an average success of about 70%. And that's about 10,000 of those trees are in completely dry land circumstances. So we think these are really important ways to be able to restore desertified landscapes, kind of back to what Brett was talking about, and develop agroecological systems that function like ecosystems but produce food. So just really excited to share a little bit about this. So thanks for listening, and hope everybody has a great day. Yeah, so awesome. Zero footprint, awesome group. 81,000 tons of carbon projected have been able to be sequestered through the funding of this grant so far. That's 9 million gallons of gasoline not burned. So yeah, I encourage all you farmers and ranchers out there that have conservation practices that need funding to apply. Applications are due by the 20th of January. And there's more info down there and my email if you have any questions for me. So thanks a lot.